Hey, welcome to Coding with Iffy. Thanks for joining me. I'm Ifani Isito, and today we're going to be building out a form field component with React. It's not just going to be React, it's going to be with React, MaterialUI, TypeScript, um, Jest, React testing library, and we're doing it in the context of a Next.js app. And there's also going to be some Storybook in there. And the idea of this is basically to show how I would go about building a real world feature, a real piece of functionality. I'm planning to do it in the same way that I would approach a similar task as part of a team, as a contractor working for a company or something like that. I'm doing this for those, you know, I guess mostly beginners who are interested in seeing the workflow, like a real workflow, and not just how would I say, not just simple code, but you want to see tests, you want to see everything. So that's what this is about. So yeah, thanks again for joining me, and let's continue with it. Welcome everyone, welcome. I am Ifani, my name is Ifani Isito, and today I'm going to be building a React component, specifically a form field component. What we want to end up with is something that looks like this. Well, actually, ultimately, what we want to end up with is this. We want to end up with a suite of components that we can use to build out a form similar to this one. Well, as part of that, I need to build the individual field components like the text field, the selector field, and so on and so forth. But the common component amongst all of them is the form field component, right? So if we have a look at this here, this Figma file, this is an example of a text field component. This bit that you see here, this is the text input. So if I were to remove this, everything that is remaining is the field, is what I'm calling the form field component, right? So this with the text input is now the text field component. So this is a fairly simple component to build, but there's going to be quite a few parts to doing it. It would involve a few things, right? So, and there will be a few technologies that we will explore. So things like we're going to build it. Well, this is being built in the context of a Next.js app, and the front-end stack includes Next.js, MaterialUI, styled components, TypeScript, and so on. All right. So we're going to touch a bit of all these things, and we're also going to be doing it in a test-driven manner, or at least we're going to be testing our components as well. My aim with this task is to do it somewhat like how I would do a real task. Let's say I was part of a software development team, a front-end team, and this was a task that I was given. So I want to build it somewhat like that, so that those that are newer to front-end development can see, or software development as a whole can see what is involved in building out a task, right? So we'll be doing everything, branching off of the main branch and all sorts, right? So let's get back to this form field component. So ultimately, what I want to end up with is code. I want to be able to code this like this. I want to be able to say form field. All right, and as part of the form field, I can specify the label. I can specify the help text. I can specify that it's required. I can even specify that it's invalid. The aim is that when I specify things like is invalid, everything that is in the context of this form field will respond to the fact that it's invalid. So this text input should make its border red when it's invalid. It should become something like this, and so on. So it's going to be sort of like a smart component, for lack of better words. But this is the general idea. So what I'm going to be building out today is not the text input. It's just a form field. So it's not this, right? It's just going to be this. And then as part of a separate session, we will build out the input, the text input, and just keep taking it out from there. So let's start with that. I'm going to be building in the context of Storybook, building it out with Storybook. So right now, these are the components that I have so far, right? So I have my job list, a hero, search box, site header. So I want to add another component. I want to add a form field component. So currently I'm on the main branch. So I want to do this as if I'm building as part of a team. So in this situation, what I'm going to do is branch off the main branch to start building this component, right? So I'm going to say git checkout with the B flag, which is to branch off the main branch. And I'm going to call this branch form field, right? So now I'm on my form field branch. I just means Ifani, so it's my initials. Allows me to easily identify the branches that I'm working on. So now what I'm going to do is just set up some basic scaffolding for the components. All my components live in a components folder. So in my form field folder, I'm going to call the component formfield.tsx, the file formfield.tsx. I'm going to put a basic component in here. All I'm going to return is form field. I'm just going to return the string form field for now. I'm going to create also a basic story, form field story. I'm going to copy it from one of the other stories for now. So let's copy this hero story, right? And I'm just going to replace the word hero with form field. And I am going to now just return form field. TypeScript is complaining. I do not think we need the provider's decorator for this, so I'm going to take this out. It wants me to return actual JSX. So this is my basic story. So if I were to open Storybook, I can now see my form field component here, just a basic form field component at this point here. All right, so now I can start to actually build out this form field. So generally my strategy is to always start with the bare minimum thing, just something to start going, to get going with. I normally don't build out the entire thing in one go. So I would never just have my branch and then build out the full thing and then submit a PR for that. What I'll probably do in most cases, unless the team has a different way of working, is I would build out the bare minimum with the minimum of everything, the minimum of tests and so on, and then iteratively add. So I will add a feature that includes the tests for that feature and so on and so forth. So in this case, that's what I want to do, right? I'm going to build out the bare minimum here. And let's see if we can identify what that is. The bare minimum will be probably, let's say this could just be that it will output the label, let's say we have the root, and then we have a label component, and that label is going to be taken from props, right? So let's do that. The label is always going to be required. Now let's build out these components here. We're going to be building it with styled components. So let's say the root. I'm not sure what the root is going to be just yet. So I'm going to not build that one out just yet. But I know I'm going to be dealing with a label. Right? And this is going to be a styled label tag. So MaterialUI has its own label tags and whatnot. And I'm choosing for this particular job not to use them because I want to have full control over the styling and different things. So this is going to be a label tag. All right, let's start off with that. Now, if we go back to our story, nothing is being displayed because now we need to pass. So we need to rename this. Let's rename this file as FormField stories, and we need to pass it as props. So the way that we do that in Storybook is to say, since we are binding to this template, right, we're going to say the way we specify args is to say default args. And then here we get some type in, so we know label, and the label we can then call it job title. Right, so we now see that the job title is being displayed. So let's now format that label. But first of all, I want to give myself a bit of nice formatting in the story itself. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to wrap this with a box, and I'm going to give it a padding of 2, which is the equivalent of 16 pixels. Now let's style the job title to be the styles that are in our Figma file. So with Figma, this is nice because I can easily just go here and I can go to the inspect tab and I can more or less copy the styles that I want. So I can copy these, for instance. Right, so this will give me basic styles. So if I were to look here, we see now it's styled exactly how we've defined it. Now, for those of you that might not be aware of what style components are, style components, it's an API or a library or a way of creating components that are styled in a particular manner. The main goal is to create a component that is already styled. Not going to go into too much as to why you would want that in this particular video, but let me know if that's something you want me to go into more detail. But this is basically how you would use it. MaterialUI is gives us a styled function, a styled utility function that we can use to create styled components. So that's what we're doing. So like I said, we have the job title now. A lot of these styles are already defined at a theme level. All right. So we have this theme file here where we define things like colors, and by default, Material UI makes use of the Roboto font. So if we look in the document file, we can see we are pulling in Roboto. So what this means is that we don't have to, what this means is that we don't have to add all of these. We can take a lot of these out. So we can take out Roboto. Let's take stuff out and just make sure. We can take that out. We can take this out. We probably want to, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So the reason why when I take that out and we are not getting any more styles is because in the stories, I am not using the providers that provides the theme and all of that sort of stuff. So I took it out thinking I didn't need it, but actually I do need it. So I do need this. So let's add that back in. Let's add it to the bottom. So this providers is where we're setting up things. This providers component is where we're setting up the store provider, because the app is making use of Redux, and the theme provider. So as you see, now that I've done that, the styles are looking normal again. Now let's take out the remaining styles that we don't need. Let's see what happens when we take that out. Oh, we want that in there. So by default, it's not 500. Font size, I think, is 16 pixels by default. So we can take this out. Yep. And we can take out the line height. I think whatever is the default line height is what we would want to probably use in this particular instance. Now we have something here. We have the color, but we have also defined colors within the theme. So it's preferable to use the colors that have been defined within the theme, so that if we need to change all the themed colors at once, we can easily do that at the theme level, and that theme file and everything just reflects. So to do that, we do this. And then we can say theme dot palette dot UI dot black. All right, so that's now giving us the black color, the same color. If we look in our theme, we have here the colors, the UI colors that have defined, and I'm extending the actual palette with my custom palette. So that allows me to do theme.palette.ui.black. Right, so that gives me the black color. And then I can use this as a regular component here. So that gives me the styles. Now let's add a test to verify this. All right, we're using jest under the hood with the describe and it blocks. All right, so we're going to say describe form field. And then we can say it renders the label. All right, so let's say render with theme. Now I'm going to explain what this is. So render with theme is a custom function that I have created, a custom renderer function, right, that I've created. I'm using under the hood. We're using React testing library under the hood. React testing library provides a render function, right? It provides a render function, but I want to render with the theme provider, right? Because I'm using style components and I'm accessing stuff from the theme. It's going to break if I just do the regular render, right? So I'm saying render with a theme, and I'm calling this, so form field, and I'm going to say label, and I'll call it foo. So now what I want is to say something like expect the label foo to be in the document. Now, obviously, those of you that are, that use testing library will know that this is not an inbuilt thing. This is something I'm going to create. I'm going to say the label, and I'm going to use a selector. So label is more or less a selector. Screen is something that comes from testing library. Get by. I wonder if I can do get by rule. Is there a label rule? No, there's no label rule. There is something called get by label text, but that, from my understanding, will give you back the input that the label is being used to wrap it, right? So to effectively test, but what we want to check is that the label, you know what we can do? We can get by text. We can say, let's say in this instance, we can say expected text foo to be in the document. So this is not really the best way to do it, I think, but let's go with this for now. Not the best test, but let's do it for now. Let's run this test. Oh, so it's failing because we need to use an uppercase F. So this now works, but this is only telling us that this test is only telling us that the word foo is in the document. It's not necessarily telling us that foo is a label. Because I do care about that in the test. I do care about the fact that it is a label. It has to be a label. Semantically, we care about that. But so there's a problem in the way that we're testing it because we haven't fully built out the components. Because we haven't fully built out the components, it's sort of forcing us to test it in a way that it's not really meant to be tested. I think the way this is meant to be tested is that we want to be able to do something like this, really. What we really want to be able to do is something like this. And then we put an input. Let's call this ID job type. And let's say we set a value of senior developer. Then what we want to be able to now do is say something like expect the input labeled foo, or let's call it job type to make it a bit more real. This is really what we want to do. And this is why you kind of want to start off with writing tests, because it kind of shows you what you should build first. And otherwise you can get a little confused, as you've seen. So we can say expect the input labeled job type to be in the document. If we want to give us more confidence about this, we can even say something like to have value and we say senior developer. So this is definitely telling us that it's rendering a label, because we don't, I said earlier on that we care about the fact that the text is rendering as a label. That's not true. I guess that's what I should say. It's not true. What we care about is that an input with a particular label, right? Like we care that the label is being used properly. Now, the label can be used in different ways. It could be an ARIA label. It could be some specified in different ways. And what we don't want is for the test to break if it's now specified as an ARIA label versus a textual label or something like that, right? We just care that the input has a label. That's what we care about. So we're going to say, so that's why we want to do it like this. So let's now amend our components to allow this to work. So we want to say label, and then we want to say something like, we want the ability to say something like label for job type. So it's the label for whatever this input is. And we're calling this job type, right? That's what we want to say. But before we do that, let's fix this here. This input labeled is going to be, we're going to say get by role, or get by, actually it's going to be get by label text. And it's going to be, let's call this label. Right? So let's fix this text now. So if we go into our form field component, we have a label. We need to have a label for, we want to be able to say, so that's label for, and that's passed to the HTML for. We need to accept children. Type that as a React node. And we're going to just put the children here, like that. Let's accept it here. Now, this now should work as we expect. So the tests should pass. Okay, so we're getting a TypeScript error here because it's saying that whenever we use an input, we set a value, we want to set an unchanged. So let's just put it to an empty function. So our test now passes. What we're getting now is this is returning to us the actual input via the label that we've specified here. So if we were to do a screen.debug, we can see that it's giving us back the input, the correct input. Right, so this passes. So this is our initial, I can call this the initial form field component. Right, so I'm going to commit this work now. Commit this now and push it. Right, and I could at this point even just create a PR out of this, right? At this point, right? So implement initial form field component. right? So this pull request has the three files: the form field stories, the form field test, the form field, the initial form field component with some styles and so on. And that's going to do some CI checks. And I would actually, at this point, merge this in once it builds. So I'm building out everything incrementally. This is how I would normally do it. I don't like to build everything out at once, because I find that when I build everything out at once, and what tends to happen is that once you're finished building, it's harder to test. Like if, let's say, you went and you built first, then tested, it tends to be harder. And when you do it this way, where you do a little bit, then you submit a PR for it, do a little more, submit a PR, it allows the team to somewhat be able to see how you're progressing. And it just makes it easier for the team to be able to review what you have done, because your PRs are small. When your PRs are large, it's harder to review, and it makes it easy for devs to not give a good review, or to defer you giving you a review if there's too much involved in your PR. So this is why it's good practice to start off with the base thing to be the initial thing, and then from that point on, subsequent, work is added as separate pull requests, and the development is incremental. All right. So let's see how far this is. So the tests have run, and now it's deploying the app to Vercel. Right. So this is we have set up a continuous deployment pipeline on top of Vercel. So it will run my tests, check the format, run linting, check types and different things. Once everything passes, it's going to then deploy it to Vercel. So this is almost done. Once this is done, we can continue. Okay, that's taking a little time. So what I'm going to do, is I'm going to continue with the tasks while that does its thing. Okay, so this is it for part 1 of the video. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch it up until this point. I know it's been a long video, and we're not even done yet. We have only just implemented one part, one feature. And I'm going to be releasing the part 2 and part 3 of this video, so that where we build out the whole form field component. If you're interested in seeing that, please do subscribe, and I will really appreciate it if you give me a like. And if there are any questions that you might have about it all, just feel free to leave a comment, and I will aim to address every comment I have there. So thank you for taking the time again to watch the video, and stay tuned for more. Thank you.